I'm really delighted to introduce our next presenter today. You can sit down now. I guess that's less awkward for you. All right. So I'm very excited to introduce our next presenter. She's an author, she is a speaker, she is an abuse recovery coach. She's the co-founder of the Bucket Brigade Against Abuse and WILD, which stands for Women in Leadership Development. Our next presenter holds a master's degree, and she's the author of One Phase, Shed the Mask, Own Your Values, and Lead Wisely. She has visited and volunteered in 45 countries. And often in those situations, she was the speaker on relational ministry, abuse recovery, and women's leadership development. She's a mother of two and a lover of good books. She freely admits to being a recovering neat freak who sometimes leaves dirty dishes in the sink longer than she should. So, I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to say that from her bio. I think that was appropriate. And so, it is with really, really great pleasure that we welcome Sarah McDugal today to our Rise Up rally. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Dominique. My water bottle is cool, but I don't think it's nearly as cool as Jennifer's was. It's very obviously just plain water, so no questions about that. Let's see here. I need to swap out these, and I'm not sure. Hello, somebody here? I think we need to do this. This is not my laptop, so forgive me. Yep, we got it. There we go. Now what do we do here? Play. Okay, I don't know what that is. I could, but that's not my title. So hold on a second, y'all. There. Better. Not sure what happened to that. So this is fun because I really like interacting and engaging with people, and I can't see any of you. So yay me. That means you're going to have to make noise because I cannot. Oh, that's so much better. Thank you. Does anybody mind? Does it affect the ambiance in a negative way if we have some lights on? Because I like to see you. Okay, so Dominique and I go back a long way. And Dominique, what's my new end time? Because I didn't start when I was supposed to. And I don't have a problem with that. Unless you actually want me to end when I was supposed to. And I have a problem with that. So 10:50. All right, I will do my best. Today, I want to talk to you about truths about abusers, and I have a tremendous amount of information that I want to share today. There are a lot of facts, because one of the things that we always want to do in an abuse situation, I say we, like the collective we, particularly in faith communities, but also sometimes in non-faith communities, the focus tends to be on rehabilitating the abuser rather than supporting the victim. Has anyone ever experienced that? Now, does that mean we should not seek to rehabilitate abusers? No, of course not. Does that mean that the only thing that matters is protecting a victim? No. But very often we get our priorities backwards in the middle of the situation. Now, today I want to ask you to latch on to the end of a fire hose and drink with me. I'm going to just go quickly through some very important things here. So I also need someone who is better at tech than me to get it so that it works for my presenter notes. Can you do that? Michael? Dominique? Somebody? Okay, so abuse comes in many, many forms. Jennifer already covered some of that for you this morning, and this is one of the ways, well, we're going to let you do whatever you need to do.
Okay. What are you trying to do?
I need it to show my presenter notes on this screen.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Can I do that while, there we go. Sorry, guys.
This is Keynote.
Yes, it's Keynote. Okay, somebody needs to know how to do this better than us, clearly. You know what? My clock's ticking. Help is coming. Good.
Is it?
It's not my laptop, and it wasn't set up for this, so it needs to show these while it's playing.
I'm not a Mac fan, but
Well, we can't be friends.
Well, there we go. While they are doing that, I actually forgot to say something in the break, so this is good. We'll just wing it here for a second. So I did forget to mention that we have with us throughout the whole weekend, including today, wonderful first aid counselors that are at all of our events. Can those that are here right now sort of show themselves? Back up there, if you guys turn around, there's a hand coming up here in the back, so you guys can kind of see. Thank you guys for being here. These individuals are available for you if you feel that you need to talk, if anything you're experiencing during the presentation, so please feel free to reach out to our first aid counselors, okay? And they're here for all the events. They wear little name tags that say first aid counselors. And also we have for the Counseling and Testing Center a table that is set up outside with other resources that you can connect with. If you're from our campus, if you're a student on our campus, the Counseling and Testing Center is always here for you. So please do connect with them, okay? So that was an important announcement that I could use this time for. How are we doing?
And we're not going to have the notes, and that's okay too. Okay, we'll deal. Thank you for trying. All right, so to recap that thought, Jennifer went through several of the forms of abuse already this morning, but I want to show you the power and control wheel that we've already developed that is, I've been told, and Dominique said as well, that she got feedback that this is the most comprehensive thing that some people have seen. We went and we pulled from a variety of different power and control wheels to put together the 12 forms of domestic violence. So abuse can come in any number of these and in any combination: children, culture, emotional abuse, financial, intellectual, pets, property, physical, psychological, sexual, social, spiritual, and verbal. But here's the thing. They all emanate from a core center mindset that I have the right to take power over you. It's my right to have power over your body. It's my right to have power over your relationship with God. It's my right to have power over your feelings. It's my right to have power over how you worship. Any of these types of things all go back in, and I work heavily in the faith context, so as I look at it, it all goes back to the mindset of Lucifer, the opposite of God, because God is all about free choice. Lucifer is all about power over. So when we look at this, it is about people saying that I want to have the power of God, but I don't have his character. One basic mentality permeates all abusers' patterns of thinking: entitlement, power, control. I have the right to make you act the way I want you to act because of how it makes me feel. Now, for clarity, in today's presentation, and I know that this is not a blanket statement, not all abusers are male, not all victims are female, but it's really hard to switch back and forth between pronouns all the time, so I'm just going to he, I'm speaking of an abuser, she, I'm speaking of a victim. So I want you now to follow with me and track with me. I'm going to move quickly in a number of important facts and statistics drawn from the work of people who have spent tens of thousands of hours researching both abuse victims and abusers in abuse intervention programs and so on. Men who abuse women use the same tactics as pedophiles, and according to Don Hennessy, the author of How He Gets in Her Head, I've never met one who wanted to change. So we're talking about truths about abusers, right? So when you're coming into a situation, especially if you are a community leader, a faith community leader, someone who cares about the victim of being someone who has been abused. Your instinct may be to encourage, to wait for change. And can change happen? Yes. I'm giving you statistics from those who have worked in this field and what they have observed. This does not mean that I am stating categorically that the gospel has no power over someone with an abusive mindset. So I want to make that very, very clear. Thomas Pride, Psalm 82 Initiative, he's one of our presenters here. Perhaps 1 in 10 abusers will put effort into transformation, and even then, not all will follow through. The average abuser would rather lose their family than stop being abusive. What does it go back to? A working mindset of power, entitlement, and control. If that mindset is not changed, no amount of stress management or behavioral change or modifications or the victim making herself smaller and smaller and smaller and erasing her identity will ever stop the abuse. In order, this is from Mike Tucker, Mad About Marriage, from the TV show Faith for Today. In order to genuinely change, this is key, especially if you are a leader people come to for advice. Abusers need to participate in regular abuser intervention therapy, defined as 3 to 4 times per week for a minimum of 3+ years, before the victim gives any trust or hope in the transformation actually lasting. So when someone comes to you and they're saying, it's been really nice to me for the last 6 weeks, I think we turned over a new leaf. Stop there. The average sexual predator has between 50 and 150 victims before their first arrest, and many more after. So this whole idea that if they were guilty, they would be in jail, right? No. That's a whole different presentation. Come Sunday, we're talking about handling criminal situations. That'll show up in that presentation, Sunday afternoon. Most sexual abuse is committed by heterosexual males, not homosexuals. That is a myth. The FBI estimates that on average, there is 1 sex offender per square mile in the United States. Now, around here, all those large open fields, that's where nobody lives. So in the concentrations of towns, there's a lot more. 1 in every 25 people are sociopaths. That means they have no conscience. Does that mean that every sociopath is a serial killer? Of course not. You can have absolutely no conscience, and the worst thing you've ever done is throw somebody under the bus every couple of months at work. But it means you don't feel bad about the wrong things you do. That's 4 out of every 100 people you know has no conscience and is capable of doing anything they decide to do, regardless of the moral or social implications, and not feel bad at all. Martha Stout's book, The Sociopath Next Door, is absolutely required reading if you're into this subject. Abuse is a systemic pattern of beliefs. It is not an isolated set of individual mistakes. Anyone who tries to tell you that you're being bitter and unforgiving and dredging things up when you start pointing out patterns and trends, you have a problem. Now, Jennifer kind of talked about cluster B and dark triad or dark tetrad personality issues this morning already. Abusers are often, not always, but often high on the spectrum of cluster B or dark triad personality disorders. Cluster B disorders are defined as narcissist, antisocial, borderline, the dark triad, or if we add sadism, the tetrad, narcissism, Machiavellian, and psychopaths. Now, for the sake of this presentation, the words psychopath and sociopath will be used interchangeably. There are some nuances if you're really into the psychiatric diagnostics, but we're not going to dig that deep today. Now, I want to define the difference, though, between narcissists and sociopaths, because when we're talking about truths about abusers, if you're working in this field, if you're a victim, it's very likely that you've experienced someone who is high on the narcissism index or high on the sociopath index. So narcissists are defined as having an inflated sense of self-importance and a lack of empathy for other people. There are 9 diagnostic trait criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, but they all boil down to these 2 core traits: focus on me, cannot connect with your feelings. Sociopaths, there are 7 diagnostic criteria for this, and you only have to qualify for 3 for a sociopath diagnosis. Number 1, doesn't respect social norms or laws. They break laws or overstep boundaries. Lies or deceives others, uses false identities or nicknames, or uses others for personal gain, tends to not make long-term plans, often behave without the thinking of the consequences, shows aggravated or aggressive behavior. They can get into fights, physically harm others. They don't consider their own safety or the safety of others. That can even be in thrill-seeking as opposed to aggressive, violent behavior. Doesn't follow up on personal or professional responsibilities, things like being repeatedly late to work or not paying the bills on time. Doesn't feel guilt or remorse for having harmed or mistreated others. You look at these and you realize you can be a sociopath without being a criminal. Despite the fact that decades of research have demonstrated that people cannot reliably tell who's lying and who isn't, most people believe they can. You think that you could smell evil. And you'll probably hear that a few times through this weekend from different people. You think if someone was capable of that, you'd know. And that is exactly what creates perpetrator bias, especially in situations like faith communities or work environments where that person may have been abusive to you, but when you go to report it to your boss, well, maybe they've really been nice to the boss because there's perks to be gained there. And the boss says, or your pastor says, I can't believe that. They're always so nice to me. This is from Anna Salter, who wrote the book Predators. It is a fantastic read, not to be done at night or in a house alone. You will lose sleep. This is Dr. Martha Stout, the author of Sociopath Next Door. Page 26, we are usually unable to tell the difference between those who possess conscience and those who do not. One of my favorite phrases is you can believe some of what they say and everything they do. And the breakdown, the dichotomy comes when the words and the actions don't match, but the words are very, very persuasive. The tears may be very, very persuasive. And something I tell young women that I work with is if someone is crying and apologizing, give them a tissue. Don't give them a ring. If they are so sorry and it's already happened 16 times, give them a handkerchief. Tell them you are sorry. But do not believe words that do not match actions. Change and repentance do not equal I'm sorry. They equal I won't do that again. In an abuse situation, you may very well be dealing with someone who is not only uninterested in changing, but who is operating from a mindset that actively prevents transformation. If you are a faith leader especially, this is incredibly important. This is one of the reasons why we do not ever recommend couples counseling for situations with abuse. Do not, pastors, believe that you can tell who's telling the truth. Because if you have counseled in an abusive situation, you will always be being lied to. 1, by the abuser who's saying it's not his fault, and 2, by the victim who's telling you it's way better than it actually is. Every victim lies. Now think about this. We always say victims are lying when they actually report. No, every victim lied all the way up to the point of reporting because they said it was okay. It's when they finally report that they're not lying anymore. And in situations like faith-based couples counseling, what so many leaders do not realize is that theology and typical conflict resolution and stress management and behavior modification tips that may work fine in a situation of two healthy people will be weaponized to justify abusive behavior patterns of control and power when they leave your office. Dr. Martha Stout says, sociopaths have no trace of empathy and no genuine interest in bonding emotionally. If a marriage partner has any value to a sociopath, it is because the partner is viewed as a possession, one that the sociopath may feel angry to lose, but never sad or accountable. Abusers project their actions onto others, accusing their victim of being abusive. But here's the thing. We all project. Have you ever yourself or heard someone else say, I can't believe how they sleep at night? How can they look in the mirror in the morning and be okay with it? Because they don't have your conscience. You are projecting your good conscience onto someone who doesn't have one. You are assuming that they would feel bad because you would feel bad. You can't do that. Onlookers and victims tend to mistakenly view abusers as just the same as me, but who made a mistake, experienced a little tough circumstances, or had a bad day, or a bad month, or a bad week, or a bad year. But the victim changing and trying to erase themselves and their identities to not create triggers will not fix the tendency to abuse. In order to address the issues in the relationship, you must address the patterns of abuse, not the victim's responses to abuse. Lundy Bancroft, if you are interested in this topic, read Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men by Lundy Bancroft. It's not a difficult read. It's not a heavy academic book, but it will blow your mind. Perhaps his loudest, most obvious, or most intimidating forms of abuse come out when he's angry, but his deeper pattern is operating all the time. It is the value system that is unhealthy, not the psychology. So you cannot fix an abusive situation with behavior change or a psychological input. It is a fundamentally power-driven value system. Here's the thing. Back to that projecting your good conscience onto someone. Typically, we want to believe that an abuser doesn't know what they're doing. Because if they knew what they were doing, right, they wouldn't do that. Let me tell you a story. This is from Lundy Bancroft's book. One year, his colleagues, David and Carol, were preparing a skit for a conference on abuse. And so they decided to perform the skit for their abusers intervention group and ask them for feedback. Afterwards, the group members rapid-fired their suggestions for improving the skit. This is how you make it better, guys. So these are the abusers giving feedback to the counselors on how to improve their abuse information skit. They directed most of the feedback tips at David. No, don't make excuses for why you're home late. That puts you on the defensive. You got to turn it around on her and tell her you know she's cheating on you. You're staying too far away from her. David, take a couple of steps toward her so she knows you mean business. You're letting her say too much. You got to cut her off and stick to your points. And the counselors were struck by how deeply aware the abusers were of the tactics they use, and they forgot, in the excitement of giving feedback, they forgot and let down their facade as an out-of-control abuser who doesn't realize what he's doing. Also by Lundy Bancroft. An abuser almost never does anything that he himself considers morally unacceptable. In short, an abuser's core problem is that he has a distorted sense of right and wrong. The abuser's problem lies above all in believing that controlling or abusing is justifiable. They give examples in the book, Why Does He Do That?, of talking to men who were violently abusive to their wives. And they were saying, okay, so what if you just went up and kicked your mother in the head? Oh my goodness, you can't do that. Well, because to them, their sense of moral code said you cannot do that to a mother, but you could do it to a girlfriend. So there was this point where the abusers realized that they would just let themselves go and do what they gave themselves mental permission to do what they believed was justifiable. Victims and onlookers often tend to think, if he can just see that this hurts me, he'll stop. And this is not the case. Far too often, therapists, counselors, pastors, and peers have these exact same misconceptions about abusers, and they simply need to see the pain they cause. I remember someone telling me at one point in my past, a pastor, telling me that if I would just write a letter to the person who had taken dynamite to the foundation of our family, if I would just write a letter and outline all the ways he'd hurt me, that it would be okay from then on. And I was like, are you crazy? That'll be weaponized and turned right back around against me. I will be outlining every single dart. It'd be handing over ammunition on a golden platter. I'd started to learn by then. I still had a lot to go. We all do. But the idea that if you can just communicate the amount of pain, that the abuse will stop is a myth, because empathy is lacking. Those who are perpetrating abuse have generally seared their conscience to the point that hurting someone else no longer makes them feel bad. When we get to that point, it is then, if we go back to our power wheel, that we realize by the time you can hurt a child, emotionally and verbally abusing someone is nothing. By the time you can control your partner's money and access to friends and ability to relate with God and everything else, well then sexual abuse is nothing. By the time you can physically assault someone you claim to love, then controlling other aspects of their life or their access to other people that they might be able to talk to or tell, that's nothing. And so we see that once the center core of belief that I have the right to take power over you, once that corrupts the moral compass, everything else is fair game all the way around the power wheel. So what do we do when we realize that our assumptions have been mistaken? How do you take away from this, recognizing things you thought about abusive individuals may have been ranging from naively misinformed to outright myths? What do? Here's 3 things. So if you remember something besides some of those really scary facts up there that may be burned into your memory from the beginning, if you remember something, here are 3 things that I want to give you, and I'm going to finish ahead of time. She never thought I would do that. So, 3 things. 1, this is how we do better. Number 1, acknowledge that abuse is a series of deeply embedded patterns and ways of thinking which short stints of counseling will not erase. And if you want to think about the Bible and Bible stories, Saul became the Apostle Paul. And once he had his blindness and conversion experience, where did he go? He went to the desert for 3 years to be reprogrammed by communication with God. He did not go immediately into public ministry. He did not begin immediately teaching people things. He did not go from persecutor into prophet and evangelist. He went to the desert for 3 years, and he came out when God said, now you're ready. Quick counseling and rapid reconciliation pleas from spiritual leaders are detrimental. Not only to the victim, we can all see that, but they are detrimental to the salvation of the abusive person. Because if you are telling someone that they need to just quickly reconcile, I'm going to make a strong statement. You are telling the first lie from Eden. You are telling the abuser that sin doesn't kill things, and you are perpetrating the work of the serpent. When you tell an abuse victim that they need to go home, be more submissive, pray harder, talk to them quietly alone, you are telling the same message simultaneously to the abuser, is that I get to keep having power and control. My sin didn't kill that relationship. My sin didn't kill that trust. I can sin with impunity because the pastor said, or the teacher said, or the community leader said, sin doesn't kill things. Number 2, how we can do better. Reject the goal of rapid reconciliation between parties in an abusive situation, and instead replace that with working towards safety, stability, and healing for the victim, and accountability and justice for the abuser. And last, realize that you, no matter how smart or educated or intuitive you are, you simply cannot reliably discern whether the abuser is lying or telling the truth, even if you're their closest friends. You can't. Watch their actions, not their words. And if you want to write one more thing down, well, just one second. When you're watching for their actions and not their words, look for transparent disclosure, things to look for, commitment to accountability, and willingness to accept limitations in the long term before you decide whether or not repentance might possibly be real. If someone is minimizing their disclosures, if someone is minimizing the pain caused to the victim, if someone is chafing under limitations that have been placed upon them, that is not repentance, that is manipulation and control. You can believe some of what they say, but everything they do. Thank you.